On behalf of the Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Fund, welcome to the launch event of our community study, A Portrait of Bay Area Jewish Life and Communities. I'm Julie Gold, the Federation's Director of Community Impact. We are so excited to be here with you today and to learn with you through this landmark study about our Bay Area Jewish population. And with this event, we officially launched that learning. There are so many people to thank for this endeavor, and I'd like to begin with our generous portrait funders. They are the Jim Joseph Foundation, the Koret Foundation, the Laszlo and Tauber Family Foundation, the Levine-Lent Family Foundation, the Lisa and John Pritzker Family Fund, the Newton and Rochelle Becker Charitable Trust, Sinai Memorial Chapel, Taube Philanthropies, Jewish Community Federation and Endowment Fund, Jewish Federation of Silicon Valley. Let's give them a hand. And I'd also like to thank our extraordinary research team, led by Professor Stephen M. Cohen and Dr. Jack Euclides. More about them in a moment. Our esteemed academic advisors, led by Professor Susan Folkman, and also including Professor Ari Y. Kelman, Professor Shaul Kellner, Dr. Lawrence Kotler-Berkowitz, Professor Aliyah Saperstein, and Professor Lee Schulman. And now a bit of housekeeping. I want to let you know what to expect today. So first we are going to hear a presentation of the data from our researchers for 50 minutes, that's 50. Following their presentation, Federation CEO Danny Grossman will provide brief remarks, and then we turn the remaining hour of the program to you, with Danny moderating your questions. When we conclude the formal program, there'll be additional time to mingle and chat with the researchers following the event. And as you leave, please make sure that you take with you a copy of our community study highlights report. We'll be distributing them as you exit. And last, following the Rollout events this week, we'll be posting the highlights report, press release, the full PowerPoint presentation that you're about to see, and the study methodology report, including the questionnaire, on the Federation website. I'm sure you all know it, but it's jewishfed.org. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce our researchers to you today. Professor Stephen M. Cohen is a sociologist of American Jewry, serving as research professor of Jewish social policy at HUC and director of the Berman Jewish Policy Archive at Stanford University. In 1992, he made Aliyah, where he taught at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Professor Cohen's books include The Jew Within with Arnie Eisen and Two Worlds of Judaism, the Israeli and American Experience with Charles Liebman. Professor Cohen was the lead researcher on the Jewish Community Study of New York in 2011 and consultant to the Pew Studies of American Jews in 2013 and Israeli Society in 2015. The author of a dozen scholarly books and hundreds of articles, his research focuses primarily on the changing nature of American Jewry, its demographic future, and changing relationship with Israel. Dr. Jack Euclides is president of Euclides Associates, one of the first firms to focus on planning and management issues in the Jewish communities. Dr. Euclides has been responsible for over 150 international, national, and community projects, including 22 Jewish community population studies. He most recently completed community studies in Columbus, St. Louis, Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, and New York. Dr. Euclides holds a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, and he was a Fulbright Scholar in India. And now I give you Professor Cohen and Dr. Jack Euclides.
Okay. Do I strike the screen, or how does this work? A tefillah? Aha. Thank you. That was not built in. That was. Anyway, it'll be a pleasure to see you, but I can't because of the lights. But I'm sure this is a really highly engaged and expectant crowd. So, in any event, let's talk about the study. We want to begin by talking about the goals of this whole process, and then talk about the study itself. And Jack and I have done a lot of work together. I learned from Jack that a good study is a study which illuminates the policy decisions of the community and helps with your thinking. And it's not just the work that we do, but the work that we do together. And in this context, I'd just like to state from the outset, this study will succeed if it indeed fulfills the goal of advancing the work of our region's Jewish institutions, philanthropists, and so forth. And the way we're going to do that, I hope, is to stimulate discussion on the implications for policy and practice leading to progress. If we can do that, we'll have made a contribution. Specifically about this study itself, we've got three major intellectual goals. One is, how many Jews are there? And how many people are there in Jewish households, both Jews and non-Jews? Secondly, what do we know about their socio-demographic characteristics in a variety of ways, and we'll talk about that. And third, and probably most complex, how can we portray and analyze the Jewish engagement, connection, and behavior characteristics of this population and all the interrelationships. So that's what we're going to work on, the number of Jews, the socio-demographic character, and their Jewish engagement patterns. So as a preliminary, we wanted to lay out how we counted Jews in our study. And basically we used a very inclusive and expansive definition of who is a Jew. Certainly includes people who say that their religion is Jewish, as well as people who didn't say their religion is Jewish, but who say that they consider themselves Jews, or they're considered by their spouse, who may have answered the telephone, be he or she Jewish or non-Jewish, Jewish as well. So essentially, it's a very broad definition. Yes, it includes people who are Jewish with other religions. They are in our sample. There's a small number of them. And we used a definition of Jewish that, frankly, we used first, I think, in New York, and other studies followed. It's not a definition that's adopted by Pew, so we have used a definition that's appropriate, we believe, to the sociology of American Jews, and certainly to the Bay Area community. Children who are identified as Jews are identified by the respondent, by the person in the household is saying, yeah, these kids are being raised Jewish, or even partly Jewish children and partly Jewish adults were included in the population. I just received an email from a social scientist in Israel who argues vigorously against including partly Jewish Jews. Thank you very much. We're including them in the population. He's an old friend. We co-taught a class together. So who's not Jewish? In this situation, it was everybody. It's not everybody. Jews are still not a majority in the Bay Area or North America, for that matter. But in all seriousness, we certainly had to draw some line for purpose of analysis. It's possible we should have had a spectrum, but we had to decide, for purpose of the study, who would be counted as Jewish and who not as Jewish. If they didn't fit the definition of Jewish, they don't have a Jewish religion, they're not considered Jewish, they don't consider themselves Jewish, they don't even consider themselves partly Jewish, they're non-Jewish. And that goes for the respondent, the partner/spouse, the children. If the respondent says, we're not sure how we're raising our kids, those kids were counted as not Jewish. There we go. A little bit about the survey. We conducted the survey between late June and mid-November. At the heart of the survey is what's called a mail-to-web probability sample and other samples. But let me just tell you about the mail-to-web probability sample. We were going to conduct a telephone random digit dial sample at the heart of our sample, at the heart of our survey. But it turns out that, people in general are not answering the telephone. They're not responding to surveys. And if you go to an area where there's a sophisticated, highly educated population that is high-tech savvy, they don't answer the phone. They don't answer surveys. So we tried. and we didn't succeed. And YouGov, who is our data collection partner, they're not here right now, but they invented this other method, which I think we're going to write about from an academic journal. It's called a mail-to-web survey. You get a piece of mail, you go to the web. What's in the mail? An invitation letter identifying the purpose of the study, $2 bills that say we're legit. Please do this. And then you have and you know about who the people are. You know what they represent in that population. You see who goes to the who goes to the web, and then you construct a random socio-demographic portrait of the people you have in the sample, and then on that basis you can allow all these other samples, and I'm not going to get into it here, to come into the sample, provided they don't change the basic socio-demographic and Jewish characteristics of the sample. So those of you who may have gotten a letter from us to complete the survey or an email online, and if you happen to be among active Jews who belong to organizations, who donate to Jewish charities and so forth, actually I have to tell you, we downweighted you. Because there were too many of you, and you didn't count as much as people we obtained randomly who are far more distant from the organized, connected Jewish community. And so by working with these statistical weights, we maintain the basic parameters of the population, but we also obtain information from well over 3,000 people. This is the portrayal of the population before we do our weighting. Yes, the overwhelming majority of people who are Jewish, who say their religion is Jewish, but we also have people who have no religion, Jews who have no religion. We have people who are partly Jewish. How do we know they're partly Jewish? That's not our definition. They said, I'm partly Jewish. Or there are people who say, I'm Jewish, but my religion is Methodist. My religion is Hindu, and so forth and so on. And then we have, primarily from the probability sample, we have a tradition of including non-Jews in our surveys, people who are spouses, generally spouses of Jews in the sample. A lot of the questions are about your household, and we said, please come into the study and represent that household. And in fact, these people are weighted up when the job is done. So that testifies to the diversity of the population. And now, I just want to give you the 6 big points that we derive from the study. They may not be surprises, but they're fundamental to understanding the opportunities and challenges and contours of the Bay Area Jewish population. First, this area is home to what essentially is the 4th largest concentration of Jews in North America. To me, that indicates both resource and responsibility. Second, the community has a lot of distinctions. It's extraordinarily diverse in social class, in ethnic makeup, in LGBT characteristics. It's highly mobile, as are many other Western cities, and we'll see how that plays out. And with few natives, by natives I mean people born in the Bay Area. So many people have moved here, and it's unusually highly educated. We're going to see Jews are probably the most educated ethnic group in North America, and of all the major Jewish communities that have done studies recently, it does seem that the Bay Area has the most educated Jewish population in North America. Third, there are population bulges among the boomers, which we knew, but also among young adults. There's a huge young adult population, which certainly presents challenges for community organizing, but an incredible opportunity for the Bay Area to lead the way in experimenting and learning how we engage young people today. Fourth, notwithstanding the extraordinary wealth in this community, and there is, we need to remember, and we found significant pockets of poverty, economic distress, and especially, by the way, among young people, and we'll get into that. And we dare not forget and overlook this population. Next, while there is a small, highly engaged, affiliated population, I'm sure that includes all of you and a few other rooms, maybe many other rooms, let's not forget that, and we uncovered that the rates of engagement in Jewish life, no matter how you measure it, using old-fangled measures and new-fangled measures, and we had all of them. However you measure these things, When compared with American Jews, the Bay Area scores lower, and when compared with the West, it's kind of right on target. It's comparable to many Western communities that Jack has studied, and I looked at the Pew data set, and it compares with Pew as well. And last and not least is the matter of Israel. And there are many important findings regarding Israel. One is that younger Jews are less attached to Israel. They're not going in the opposition, but they're going into an area of neutrality, of going on the sidelines. And they're not the only ones who are moving in this direction. We've moved in this direction. There's an incredible political divide in America among American Jews and among Bay Area Jews. We see it here, as well as lower levels of Israel engagement among those married to non-Jews, and with the less affiliated population, the people who would have no idea what we're doing here today. And 43% of Bay Area Jews belong to no Jewish institution, contribute to no Jewish institution. Those people have a very different attitude towards Israel. And so those are the big stories. Each of them poses like I said, measure of challenge and a measure of responsibility. So, basic numbers, we have 148,000 Jewish households. That means a household with a Jewish adult. We have 473,000 people living in Jewish households. 123,000 of them are not Jewish. And of the 473,000 people, there are 350,000 Jewish persons who then in turn divide into 281,000 Jewish adults and 68,000 Jewish children. There's that map. Hope you like the icons. Bay Area is zooming past Chicago and is underneath the palm of Los Angeles. The LA study was conducted a long time ago. It may be different, but I'm sure it's still ahead of the Bay Area. Next, in looking at the region, we had to, we had a study done in 2004 that has a very different map than we have here. One of the glories of the study is that it encompasses all 10 counties. The 2004 study includes the Federation service area and part of the Silicon Valley area. In any event, we created a zip code map of our study against that study, and we found one thing that we can pretty much be sure of is that we have fewer Jews in that service area, around 25,000 Jewish adults, than we did in 2004. Where are they? Ta-da! They're in the East Bay. Not all of them. There's a lot of moving around, and a few East Bay Jews actually moved to Palo Alto. It did happen. But on balance, what we saw is that 25,000 Jewish adults, fewer in the Federation service area of 2004, 25,000 more Jewish adults in the East Bay service area. And now to really explain this to somebody who really understands geography and human service needs and Jewish identity and so much more, my friend, colleague, teacher, Jack Euclid. You got that, all right?
Yeah, I guess so. Stephen wasn't kidding about the lights. I know you're there. So we're going to talk about geography. So we look at a map. For analysis purposes, we divided the Bay Area into 4 areas. It's a reasonably typical way of looking at the Bay Area: the North Bay, the East Bay, Peninsula, South Bay, and San Francisco City and County. What the map, so if you look at, if you can see the numbers on the map, which I'm not sure you can, but you've got 47,000 in the north, you've got 61,000 in San Francisco, 118,000 Peninsula and South Bay, and someplace lurking here is 122,000 in the East Bay. So the map also shows us that while the 4 areas each contain a significant number of Jewish people, they are hugely different in size. City and County of San Francisco is only 47 square miles North Bay is over 2,800. East Bay and Peninsula, South Bay, about 2,200 square miles. What this means is that the Jewish density ranges significantly from 1,300 Jewish people per square mile in the city and county of San Francisco to 17 in the North Bay, and about 50 per square mile in East Bay and Peninsula South Bay. And density in any Jewish community has a significant impact on how to think about service delivery and Jewish engagement. The same data arranged in a pie chart, and as you see, East Bay and Peninsula South Bay are each about a third of the Jews. San Francisco is sixth, North Bay almost a sixth. And this spatial configuration, there is no geographic center, as there is in many other Jewish communities. And while it's not on the chart, if somebody asks you, so if everyone in the Bay Area is not Jewish, what percent are you? It's about 4%, which is roughly twice the average across the United States. So high mobility is a fact of life in American life and American Jewish life in the 21st century. It's part of an environment of constant change. We found 39% moved in the last 5 years. You can see that the biggest rate of movement, this is changing residents. Some of these are moves inside East Bay, are in the East Bay, the lowest in North Bay. We asked people what percent are going to move in the next 2 years, and overall 29% will probably move in the next 2 years. So is this a lot of mobility or a little bit of mobility? Well, it's a lot, but it's not. You're not the only ones. So, for example, in Denver in 2007, we also found 38% had moved within the last 5 years, and very similar numbers in San Diego and Denver. So let's look a little bit at demography. Age is a critical variable in thinking about any community. So the first thing I want to point out is that if you look at the balloons, 19% are children under 18, 19% are 60 and older. So what? Well, so what means that you have a relatively balanced age distribution. If you want to know what that means, go to Palm Springs. That's an unbalanced demographic age distribution. Again, this is a similar pattern to many communities in the West. San Diego was 20% under 18, 20% 60 and over. If you look just at adults, and this is Jewish adults, the previous slide was people in Jewish households. So 37, the largest percentage, you don't see the 18 to 34 group here. You see 20s and 30s. So if you're really good at arithmetic, you'll see that that's 45%. We use the language of 18 to 34, 37%, obviously consistent. And then the 50s and 60s, which pretty much approximates the boomer population, 34%. And that's very important because those become, each of those, again, have a particular pattern of challenges and opportunities. The reason you think this is an extremely sophisticated community is because it is. And one measure of that sophistication is extremely high levels of education, secular education. 42% of respondents with a graduate degree, which, as you can see from the chart, substantially higher than the United States overall by two different studies, and higher, even a little, and higher, and you see it's higher for women than for men, and the peak education group is 35 to 49. Graduate education is a good business in the Bay Area. So Stephen referenced mobility. Another measure of mobility is that only 28% were born in the Bay Area. So 7 out of 10 of the Jewish people here are newcomers in some sense. They could be a 40-year newcomer, but they weren't born here. And again, this is typical of Western communities. And in fact, there are two kinds of Western communities. You're not at the extreme end of the nobody was ever born here group. Phoenix, for example, was 6% of Phoenix respondents were born in Arizona. Your 28% is closer to what we found in Denver, is 20%. In fact, you have a smaller group that was born here and has lived here for a long time. I would also draw your attention to two relatively smaller groups that are important beyond their numbers because each are a distinct subculture within the Jewish community. 34,000 adults and children in Israeli households, 33,000 in Russian-speaking households. Incidentally, there's not a community study in the country where advocacy groups are not disappointed by these kinds of numbers. There's always a belief, and I'm sure there are people in the audience who believe the numbers are much higher, and that's, again, what we encounter. But this is our best estimate of what the numbers really are. Of respondents 18 to 34, this very large and very important group, half are not married or partnered. 26% are married, 20% are partnered. The marriage partner balance, roll back 40 years and think of what you'd find. Not that. And the half not married is important, but there's a subtext here, which is if you look at the 35 to 49 group, what percent is married? 69%. What does that tell you? It tells you, and we've confirmed this other studies, most Jewish people who are not Orthodox, that's an important not, marry after 35. And you can think about the implications for family size and family formation of that statistic. Many people think that 18 to 34s are not marrying. It's not true. They're marrying later, certainly in this community. Stephen talked about diversity as part of the big picture. 25% of Bay Area Jewish households include a respondent or spouse who is Hispanic, Asian American, African American, of mixed or other ethnic or racial background. And again, if you look at the 18 to 34 group, it's, to me, an astounding 38%. Is one of the highest percentages, probably not the highest, but one of the highest that we've encountered. In many ways, the Bay Area is the leading edge of an American Jewish trend. And again, think back 40 years. Would you have found this? I think not. Another dimension of diversity is 1 in 10 households include a respondent who is lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and particularly high, as you would have expected in San Francisco, that 19% is higher than that reported in the general community. Come on, guys. Okay. Stephen talked about vulnerability. And first, an income distribution. Again, not on in every community study we've ever done, most of the Jews are someplace in the middle, but that middle can be different places. This is a relatively affluent community. We very rarely even ask the high income breaks here, 200 to 249, et cetera. So there are a lot of folks above 250,000, and there are a lot of folks who are under 50,000. Another very important metric is on here. If you combine the two charts, you get 27%, about a quarter of all households earn less than $70,000 a year. Why is that important? That's important because the California Self-Sufficiency Standard, the SSS, which is a far more meaningful measure of poverty than the federal poverty standard, which is essentially irrelevant to human beings, ranges from 53,000 to 68,000 for a family of 3 in the counties of the Bay Area. So that means you've got a lot of folks who are at a level where they're really not self-sufficient. And to corroborate that, the next slide is a subjective measure, with 22% of households report they are just managing or cannot make ends meet. Very parallel to that 25% that we find under 70,000. And while this is a subjective measure, that correlation is very powerful, and very few people earning $250,000 a year say they're having trouble managing. This slide shows the subjective assessment of economic need by age. Many people would expect to find, and in fact in many communities we do find, that seniors are the most likely to report difficulty making ends meet. That, folks, is not the case. Seniors are in fact the most likely to be well off. Relatively small percentage are just managing, and what you have is the highest percentage of those aged 35 to 49 are the most likely to report just managing or cannot make ends meet. And in a parallel story, we asked people what percent sought help with services. 30% said they reported help with something. That's not unusual. People need help. But 17%, the highest percentage, sought help with seeking a job. Now, the second highest is 16%, but that 16%, if you read the fine print, is only of households with children. It's hard to ask people who don't have children if they need help with their children. So that percentage is more like 5% of total households. So the job issue is a real outlier. And you find that when you look at use of services by age, the young adult group is the most likely. It's a little, for some reason, the 18 to 34-year-olds are a little pale, is 41%, the highest group that seek any listed services. And if you go back, you see, what is it about? Jobs and housing, which you know far better than we, are a tough set of issues in this metropolitan area. Um, 2,000 is not a big number. 2,000 seniors 75 and over living alone. It's not a big number, but it's a big need. And again, we know from other studies, and it's true here, people who are 75 and older and live alone are much more likely to have health problems and much more likely to experience a whole series of ills related to isolation. So intergroup marriages vary from a relatively low percentage for people over 65 to a pretty high percentage for people 18 to 34. Overall, more than half of the married or partnered couples are in intergroup marriages or partners. So the question about about intermarriage at some level is moot. It's a reality of this Jewish community and many others. But I want to draw your attention not just to the under 35, because remember, only half of that group is married. This is a relatively small number. The 35 to 49 is almost as high, 59%. And again, this is virtually identical, almost exact to what we found in Denver, San Diego, and Phoenix, other Western cities. So while I've been arguing in a number of slides about how similar you are, the truth is, in the end of the day, every Jewish community is unique. And for every similarity, there's a difference. And here's a difference. In this community, The largest group of children in intergroup marriages, intergroup families with intergroup marriages or couples, are being raised Jewish and something else. On some level, that's plausible. If a Jew is married to someone who's not Jewish, there's a reasonable probability that the kid's going to be raised in whatever both is. But in other communities, in Denver, for example, most children in intermarried homes are being raised Jewish. In Phoenix and San Diego, most kids in intermarried homes are being raised not Jewish. So communities are not identical. They are different as well as similar. And that pattern of differences and similarities in many ways shapes how you think about where you're going. Speaking of going, Stephen? Okay.
Great. So we've got two more sections to deal with. One is about being Jewish, and the other is specifically about Israel. So let's get going. So just to give you a scan, these are just a minority, a small minority of the items on Jewish engagement that we looked at. And here, to give you a sense of where the Bay Area fits in with the rest of American Jewry, we compare the Bay Area to the rest of the West using the Pew data set, and the rest of the U.S., the non-West U.S. And what you'll see, and let's take very important being Jewish. That's one of the answers. To what extent is being Jewish important to you? Very important is one of the answers. In the Bay Area, 26% said being Jewish is very important to me. In the rest of the West, in Pew, was 38%, and in the rest of the U.S., it's 48%, just almost double the number here. And that's a pattern we see in variable after variable. And to me, one of the more telling little nuggets that came out of this data set in this survey is that, look at the top line, just half of the respondents in this study said last year, I went to a Seder. Half did, half didn't. I didn't mean make a Seder, I mean showed up a Seder, compared to 62% in the West and 73% in America. So we need to come to grips with that the Jewish population, which we define fairly broadly, that population is however you cut it, and there are various measures, however you cut it, is just not all that engaged in Jewish life. The next point is to understand how different this room is from what's out there. And here we constructed a measure of affiliation, which is a peculiarly Jewish concern. The Methodists, the Irish Americans, all other ethnic and religious groups do not have a term that's called the unaffiliated Irish, or the, right, sounds, we have lapsed Catholics. We don't have lapsed Jews, but we have unaffiliated Jews. So we said, all right, let's look at the unaffiliated, and we measured affiliation in a very conventional way, and to say, well, how does it relate to other measures? Do you belong to synagogue? You get a point. Do you belong to a Jewish organization? You get another point. Do you give to Federation? You get a point. You give to other Jewish charities? One more point. And are you a leader? And that was one of the questions, and you get another point. So I suppose that this room probably gets a 5. Most of you do, and you're in that last column. Look at the 43% who get no points. On the scale, they're nice people, but they get no points. Just look at how different that red column. We're going to be talking about Israel a little later, but I'll do it now. Look at the bottom row. To what extent do you feel attached to Israel? Very attached. 8% of people who belong to nothing formally Jewish, belong or give nothing formally Jewish, versus at least 40% in this room, a 5-to-1 ratio. So we need to deeply understand how different the population is, out there, the people that we're trying to reach, engage in Jewish life. They really are out there. They have less interest and certainly less activity, less attachment in a broad way. The community is exceptional for America, not so much for the West, in the small numbers of Orthodox people, conservative and Reconstructionists. Reconstructionists are 3% of that 16. The two big denominations are Reform and no denomination. Now, I've met a lot of Reform rabbis, friends of mine in this crowd. I haven't met many no denomination rabbis, so I'm just curious. We really need to take care of that, but that's another pioneering project for the Bay Area community to deal with. Okay, it's often said that denominations don't matter anymore, and I've often said that's not true. Denominations, in study after study, they significantly differ, and they differ here as well. That's really what the import of that chart is all about. And people somehow, and maybe it's not true of you, but people underestimate the power of synagogues to bring together Jews who are committed to being Jewish, to foster commitment, to express commitment, and just to get that point across. If you look at the 20-odd% who belong to synagogues versus the 70-odd% who don't, on measure after measure, there are significant differences between synagogue Jews and non-synagogue Jews over time. Now, one of the underappreciated facets of the sociology of Jews, the patterns of Jews, is that people fail to deeply understand not only are there income barriers in the sense that people can't afford to go to Israel, send their kids to Jewish camp, belong to a synagogue, and do all the things that cost money, but that less affluent people, poorer people, are less likely to be involved in Jewish life however you measure it. And here I specifically want to point to the next to last bunch of bars, which is attending a Seder. Going to someone else's Seder does not cost a lot of money. And notice the sharp differences between people who are earning under $40,000 going up to people who are earning $250,000 or more. How do we understand that? The way we understand that is that the socio-demographic center of the Jewish population are people who are fairly affluent, and people who are not so affluent are not as well connected to those people, and or feel uncomfortable in Jewish circles precisely because they're not affluent. There really are powerful social networks at work here, and we need to come to grips with the fact that the lack of affluence in and of itself, it's not a question of having the money to join, lack of affluence is a major barrier to Jewish engagement by virtue of the friends that we have and the style of life that people have, so forth and so on. Another interesting finding is that, yes, of course, we found that intergroup couples, by which we mean both married people and partnered people, and they actually were very close in a lot of measures, are less active in Jewish life, however you measure it, than in-group couples. But it turns out that singles are also very close to intergroup couples. So now that may give us a new lens on intergroup couples. And basically, what we found is that here and elsewhere, one of the best predictors of how engaged you are in Jewish life is how many Jews live in your household. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or more. Now, part of it is that people who are more engaged in Jewish life tend to live with other Jews. But part of it is that people who live with other Jews also are more engaged in Jewish life. And here we'll look at the singles and the intermarrieds. And what this suggests, to me at least, is that if we want to engage Jews who are living as the only person in their household, then we have to connect them to other Jews. How we do that, that's the next issue. But connecting Jews to other Jews is a way to engage them in Jewish life, I believe. At least that's an inference that I will draw from these data. The next two slides deal with a prevalent notion of Jewish life. Why are they not engaged? Why not? Because here's the prevalent hypothesis. And if I say that there's a conventional hypothesis, I'm about to tell you something different. So the conventional hypothesis is there are a lot of Jews who are interested in Jewish life, but we're making them feel unwelcome. If only we welcome them, they would come on in. They're knocking on the door, and we're keeping the door shut. Well, it turns out that hardly any Jews feel the community's unwelcoming. They're not yelling and screaming, "Oh, what a welcoming community!" But they're not saying it's unwelcome, and intergroup couples are not all that different from singles. It's not a major issue. Because at the same time, we asked people a very interesting question, which we haven't asked before, is that, to what extent are you interested in increasing your connections to being Jewish in any way? And we've got a very small number of people who say, oh yes, I'm very interested. Somewhat is a polite answer, and not very interested, not all interested are exactly what they're saying. And there's the intergroup couples are really the least very interested, the least likely to be very interested, the least interested in increasing their involvement. So, and then that's a paradigm. I'm not just talking about the intergroup couples for people who are not engaged in Jewish life. It's not a matter of welcoming. It's a matter of socialization. It's a matter of connection. And we need to work on both socialization, Jewish camps, preschools, Israel, the whole agenda. And it's a matter of connecting Jews when they're older to other Jews. And last here, there are varying patterns how younger people are different from older people. Most of the variables kind of head downward as we get younger, but there are a few that actually hold their own or even move upward. I'm looking at the top three. High holiday service attendance or more, Shabbat meal, which actually there's been some work in the community. I'm very, very pleased that that's going on. And Jewish cultural events going a few times a year. So people, if there's areas of strength, it's where it's in the home, and it could be in cultural life, and there are others as well. I just want to say it's a complicated picture. It's not all one-sided. We have considerable amount of volunteering going on in the Jewish community. Volunteering with Jewish groups seems to be holding steady, and giving to any Jewish cause, actually, that's something that goes down. So even though we have volunteering going on, financial contributions to Jewish life among younger people is less prevalent. And last, the whole matter of relationships to Israel. Just by way of background, over the years, birthright, Masa, and other opportunities have increased the chances of people going to Israel. There's a birthright bump in the population that I've been talking about. That's people now in their 30s and 40s have been to Israel more than in the past. There are likely to be more people who have gone to Israel 30 years from now than who are now in their 30s and 40s than there are today. And we see the Bay Area is participating in that pattern of visiting Israel. But let's not forget, most Jews in the Bay Area, adult Jews, have never been to Israel. And only 16% have been twice or more. So there's a good track record here, but there's plenty of room for growth. This is the classic question that's asked in study after study. To what extent are you emotionally attached to Israel? And we see a wide variation from 21% who are very attached to 20% who say, I'm not at all attached, and every number in between. You can look at this one way, and that is the middle numbers are bigger than the extremes, and that's going to be something that we'll see in a variety of charts here. We even asked another question that got at some of the fundamental ideological commitment to Israel. To what extent do you think it's important that there be a Jewish state in the world? Most, a slight majority said very important, but then we get the somewhats, and fully 22% could not even say that it's somewhat important to have, that there be a Jewish state, that it exists, that there be a Jewish state in the world. And as an aside, the analyses that we do on Israel attachment and engagement and pro-Israel, whatever you want to call this, doesn't change when we use these different indicators, which indicates that there's a lot of robustness here, that we're talking about several ways of measuring more or less the same phenomenon. Here's another case of it. This is the classic Pew Gallup question that's been asked for years and years. We wanted to replicate it here, asked in a little different way than there was in the Pew study. In Pew study, they only gave two alternatives. You had to volunteer the middle. We offered them the middle, so we get a lot more people showing up in the middle than Pew does. But we have, Israel, who do you sympathize with more, whatever that may mean. 33% say Israel much more, 43% say, at least somewhat more. But even though there, as we will see, there's some movement away from engagement with Israel, it's not that the people are piling up with what some would see as the opposition, the Palestinians. Rather, the growth is in, and will be within, the both, neither, and not sure category. 33% say both. It's not that they're not sympathetic, but they're sympathetic to both. And then, to put this all together, we can say no matter which measure you pick, from old to young, however, and each one has its own nuance, and each one measures a different aspect of feelings about Israel. When you go from old to young, you see a steady decline from old to young. Sympathize more with Israel, 56% among those 65 and over. Oh, point of disclosure, I'm Israeli, I'm a Zionist, so I just want to be clear that I'm not, fine, okay. No, I mean, like, some journalists will say, yeah, he didn't tell us, so I just told you. And less than a third of those under 35 say they sympathize with Israel. Well, just about half that number. And here's the phenomenon I'm talking about. No matter which variable you use, you get the same general patterns with respect to age and with respect to marriage. This is the sympathy chart. And with respect to politics. And this is very interesting. Look at the political chart, 71% for those who are very liberal, down to 26% for those who are conservative. A point, California is the most liberal state in the Union. The Bay Area is the most liberal part of California. Jews are the most liberal ethnic group in America. Educated people are more liberal than others. Jews of the Bay Area are the most educated group of all American Jews. Now, class, what would we expect about the distribution of liberals and conservatives among Jews of the Bay Area? Answer: they are extraordinarily lean to the left. I initially started analyzing very conservative with conservative. I didn't have enough very conservatives to separate out. But very liberal and liberal, oh, they each deserve their own group. So it's true. So we have liberalism in tension with a variety of Israelisms, depending on how you measure such things, and we have the most liberal Jewish population in the United States. And here's the heart of the matter. Not only are younger Jews less interested and committed to Israel and moving towards a middle position, but we also have a strong polarization of politics and Israel orientation that's occurring across America, that's occurring Americans in general, among American Jews, and here we're seeing it in the Bay Area. And it's really a challenge to the creativity of the Bay Area Jewry to figure out how do we maintain an Israel connection in a very liberal population, when the liberal population is in turn, in a variety of ways, moving away from engagement with Israel for reasons that we need to explore. There again, I don't want to belabor the point, but I'll do a little bit. Look at the leaders, that's the bottom row, and their feelings about sympathy with Israel versus the unaffiliated. And then, as you see, the more engaged you are in Jewish life, the more likely you are to be sympathetic to Israel, and this will go for other measures as well. And finally, we need to turn our attention over to the wise words of this room and discuss these results, what they mean to you, and how they will illuminate your thinking about policies and other matters.